The CMO Confidential podcast is a proud member of the I Hear Everything podcast network. Looking to launch or scale your podcast? I Hear Everything delivers podcast production, growth, and monetization solutions that transform your words into profit. Ready to give your brand a voice? Then visit iheareverything.com.
Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Auren Hoffman. Today's topic: why vendor management is a skill you need to master now. Now, Auren has been the CEO of SafeGraph, a company that collects and curates data about places, for 8 years. He is a serial entrepreneur, and I'm just going to say it out loud, a big data geek, having built and sold several companies, including Kyber Systems, BridgePath, and LiveRamp. He was a guest on the show about a year ago, and now he's back to discuss his belief that one of the key ingredients for business success will be superior vendor management in the next decade. In fact, he wrote, hiring an exec is like buying a super yacht. Expensive, high maintenance, and mostly just for show. Just rent the boat when you need it. So we're going to talk about that today. You know, before we even begin, though, I think, Auren, we ought to just take 1 minute and say what SafeGraph does so people know where you're coming from.
Sure. SafeGraph is what's called a point of interest data. So if you're searching for Italian restaurants near me, and on most of the major platforms outside of Google, you're almost certainly using the SafeGraph data.
Excellent. So let's delve into the thinking behind the quote about hiring an exec is like buying a super yacht. Tell us more, like what's behind that and what's the marketplace forces that made you post this?
So, I mean, if you think of like a executive, really what an executive is someone who's done it before. They're usually 20 years in, let's say, to their career, and they're very strategic. And in fact, that's what they want to do. They want to be very, very strategic. Most of the work that's done in a company, even a very, very large company, is very tactical. And so you're not getting the highest value out of most executives if you're asking to do these very, very tactical things, some of which they were very good at 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And some of which they even like to do 20 years ago, but now they don't necessarily want to do it. They might be a little bit out of date with the new tools. They don't want, and if you think of just like the hourly cost that you're paying them is quite high. And so what you really want for most of these executives is their strategic knowledge.
Yeah.
They have to be enough in the business. You can't just like talk to them an hour a month to get enough strategic knowledge. You have to be a little bit more in the business, but you don't need them 24/7. They could guide. In fact, they could be a great mentor to, so the person that might run marketing at your company doesn't necessarily need to be at the executive level. They could have a marketing mentor, maybe even someone like you as a marketing mentor that they could have. And that person could help guide them and help them understand things and help give them the core strategy that they will need. But then you really need an implementer who's running it. And you call them an executive, but they don't have to be somebody who has 20 plus years of experience.
But what you're almost saying here is rent the strategy. Buy the execution, rent the strategy.
That's right. And I think that's true for almost everything. So I think that's true for almost everything for most companies. And then if you try to think of like, okay, who's the executive that you could hire?
Yeah.
Well, for most companies, you can't hire the best CMO, the best CFO, the best. You're hiring like the number like 200,000th best, right? In most
Like in
cases.
Star Trek, make it so, number 2009.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like why, but a lot of times you can rent the best, or you can rent the top, like it's a lot easier to rent someone who's really amazing. And so why not just get the very top talent that could really help you, really truly the person that's out there that can help you. And then of course they like it better. Like imagine an executive and you're working for 10 companies
Yeah.
and you're just doing the strategy. Like you're going to be happier as well. So it's the highest value need for both the company and for the executive.
Hey, so Auren, when you say rent, there's a lot of ways to rent. You can put somebody on the board, you can have an advisor, you can hire a consultant, you can rent a fractional. When you say rent, do you mean all those things, or do you have a specific view of what
I
rent
think it could be any of those things.
Yeah.
It is very hard to get the most out of someone who's part-time. And so most companies have just not yet built that muscle, whether they have an advisor, whether they have a fractional, whether they're just not very good. And so we all have to get better at managing these people who are not 100% in our company. They have other things that they're doing. There's so many people today who have portfolios of 20 things. Even your board member, right? They've got so many other things that they're doing, and most people don't even manage their board member very well.
Yeah.
So how do you get the most out of this person? How do you have the agenda? How do you go to that highest value of things? Now, when you call your lawyer today, and that lawyer is charging you $1,500 an hour, you have a sense of like, they're charging me $1,500 an hour. I better only call them for the right thing. And if I need something a little bit less, I'm going to call the associate and not call the partner. And I'm only going to bring them in when I need, and so you have a sense of how to manage that. But for whatever reason, people haven't yet translated that to other people that they work with.
So how do you set that up? Because, you also said, look, you can rent almost anybody for 1 to 2 days a month. And I don't think you're talking about, look, okay, Procter & Gamble or Pepsi should maybe rent a CMO, but
Actually, I do.
CFO.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Maybe not like, if you think of Procter & Gamble, they probably have 50 people who are called CMOs at that company. And most of those, are probably not adding the value that they need to.
Yeah. So let's go back to so if I'm going to rent something for 1 to 2 days a month, one, how do I figure out the right fit for this? And then how do I figure out how I'm going to manage this person like I manage my lawyer? Because I think the lawyer example is an excellent one, which is, you will send out, you'll prepare everything, and then you'll say, maybe the paralegal could do some of this, because that's like, $400 an hour. And how do you get ready to do this?
I think it's going to be very hard. I think it's hard to retrain people, but most people don't even manage their own employees very well. Yeah. So it's very hard to manage people. It's very hard to manage vendors. It's very hard to manage anything and get the most out of them. We're all very bad at it. Yeah. And if we can start thinking, and especially if you start thinking about it in an hourly rate, you start to get better. Right. If you're starting to think, like, if I rented you right now, I may have to pay you $2,000 an hour. That's a pretty expensive.
I am super expensive.
Sorry?
I am super expensive.
Yeah, exactly. So like, and so like, then I really need to start thinking about it. Am I really getting the value out of this? And by the way, like at some point you might be like, I'm not getting the value.
Right.
I rented this person. I'm not getting, I'm renting them for $2,000 an hour, and I'm only getting $400 worth of an hour worth of value. So maybe and that's a good forcing function to then move on to the next person. And brother, doesn't mean you only have to rent one CMO. You can rent 3 CMOs. I could get a mentor if I'm like running marketing. I can get a mentor for each different types of marketing, and then the CEO can talk to 3 slightly different types of people who can help me understand. So it could be a lot of different sizes. There's no one size fit all.
Yeah. So how do I start if I've never done this before? How do I even get started? I mean,
the most important thing
logically, I probably have the lawyer thing going somewhere or something.
Yeah. So a lot of times you're in a company and you have a great person, let's say running marketing, and they're 30 years old, and they're it's a newer company. They're doing great. You're like, we gotta up level this person. We first of all, it would be great if this person had an amazing boss so they could learn. Because right now they're the top marketing person. They can't even learn from. There's no one else who can even teach them, so they're not growing as fast. This amazing 30-year-old I have running marketing, and so you do a whole search. You hire some outside search firm, and you bring in a CMO. And and by the way, these have like 30 something percent success rate that is even that it works long term. A lot of times you end up losing that 30-year-old because that you didn't hire the right CMO.
Or the path, suddenly someone else just plucks that person out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different types of things. So, okay, well, now we already have this great person. A lot of times you already have this good person somehow for some random reason. Let's surround this person. I have Mary. She's my amazing up and coming marketing person. She's going to be a super strategic person one day, but today she's just a super doer. She's been in the industry for 8 years. She's ready. Let me start surrounding her. Let me get her a mentor. Let me get her some other strategic. So it's a scaffolding around her. Maybe you think you need to replace her now, but if you scaffold her, all of a sudden you can delay that for X number of years, and then maybe you can delay it forever.
And you have to get Mary to buy in completely to this, or
Mary's gonna be bought in. It's really getting your board to buy in, because your board's gonna be like, we need someone. Mary's only 30 years old. She can't run marketing for this company. We're expecting this company to be a global power. We can't have Mary out there like she doesn't, And so it's really getting the other executive, the board and everyone she's gonna love it. Because now she's really going to have a chance to grow. She's going to be accelerating. She's going to be doing things she's never been doing before. So she's going to be, any great person is always optimizing for their own growth.
I think that's right. Particularly if you get the right relationship, you also have to they'll get the right, if you call it coach, consultant, board member, whatever, so they don't step all over the operations. So they don't become a part-time. And are there any tips you have for that? Like for people that are going to be the vendor in this case, the rented yacht?
I think people are going to have to learn how to do that as well. And the best people there are the people who can manage, manage the client rather than having the client manage them.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's really the problem today, is that and that's true for the best people, even that you hire full time, is you want someone who manages your company, manages you. You don't want to have to manage them. Whether it's an executive assistant all the way to your CFO. If you have to manage your CFO, that's a bad hire, right? And so, so ideally this, the exec, and hopefully, this executive is usually going to be a pretty senior person. So they have to come with the ability to be able to manage the client well. And if they don't, then then by the way, the good news is okay, well, if you're just paying them an hourly rate or a monthly rate or whatever it is, let's say you're paying them 10 grand a month or something, right? And they have 20, 15 clients or whatever they have. It's well, okay, 3 months in, if they're not working out, you can just stop. It's not a big deal. It's easy. Whereas if you hired that person, it's that's over $1 million decision after 3 months if it didn't work out.
And it really can slow down the strategy if you hire them.
Yeah, exactly. You just had to pay 200 grand or more to the search firm, and then you have to give that person 500 grand in severance, and and all this other stuff that you would have had to do that you don't have to do anymore.
So if I'm giving advice to someone out there recruiting somebody into these things, what are the questions you should ask if you're like the CEO or the board or whoever is recruiting this, super yacht person for 2 days or 3 days a month? Any good questions you should ask?
Honestly, help them understand your business and see if they could add value. And
so a little mini case study almost in the beginning.
Whatever. They're going to be asking you questions about your business, I'm sure, right? Any good person's going to be asking, and they'll probably already be adding value on the first call. If they're not, they're probably not good. And then the downside of trying someone is so low.
Yeah.
So why not, like, if you think if they're adding value already on the first call, you like their personality, it's working. It's like, if you have to bring on a CMO, the process to do that is going to it could take you a year, and
Yeah.
you're going to have to call gazillion references. You're going to have to interview gazillion candidates. So just the hiring process to bring on a CMO is going to take hundreds of hours of your company to go do that. Whereas if you're going to bring on a CMO a consultant, well, because again, the downside is so low if they don't work out, you could bring someone super fast. Um, and then, of course, like when you're hiring someone full time, like you have to convince them. It's really hard to convince them because they only get one shot. It's like they only work at one CMO at once. So why are they going to work for you? You're going to have all these people you want are not going to want to work with you. They're going to have so many other options. Whereas again, if the fractional, it's going to be so much easier to get that person that you want.
And your theory is it's not just CMOs, it's almost anything, right?
Any executive related thing. Yeah. Anyone who's strategic. So any like C level thing, most companies, again, like outside maybe the very, very biggest companies, most companies shouldn't have. So what the companies that I'm interacting most, startups, that startup may have like a few hundred people,
Yeah.
but I don't think a few hundred person startup should have a CFO, a CMO. Now, again, you can call that person a CFO or CMO.
Yeah.
You can call them whatever if you want to call Mary a CMO to make her feel good, great.
Right.
You can call her whatever you want. She is running marketing at your company, so call her that, but you don't need to have that like super executive that's been there, done that gazillion times already.
I think this is right. We had a OO and a CMO, and she said it's really important you understand the position you're hiring for because you're hiring essentially off a football team. So if you need a quarterback, that is totally different than if you need a wide receiver or guard or defensive tackle. You have to know what you want, and this would allow you to practice with what you want versus try and hire exactly right, particularly in that early and middle stage company where.
Yeah. And by the way, in your analogy, a lot of companies, you don't even know that you're playing football. Right? So yeah, you would think, if you know you're playing football, you know the rules of football, you need a good kicker. Right? Right. You need that. But like you don't know the game often. And like, why do you necessarily need a kick? You like, again, if you have an NFL team, you got to go spend, $5 million a year on a great kicker. Every NFL team goes to do that. If you got a good kicker and you're playing baseball and you spend $5 million a year on that person, a guaranteed contract for 10 years, like this is a terrible decision, right? So you don't know, you just don't know. So having that, you want an all-around athlete that can do lots of things. You don't necessarily want someone could just kick that ball and kick that field goal for you. That is a very bad use of time unless you know precisely what you need.
Well, and I also think if you're particularly in startup land or early stage companies, you may think you need a super quarterback, but really what you might need is someone that is fantastic at acquisition and maybe social media or something just to get things going versus somebody that's run like a Fortune 500 department.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, like Patrick Mahomes, if you want Patrick Mahomes to play on your team right now, you can't. Right? He's committed to the Kansas City Chiefs. But right now, if you want Patrick Mahomes to just teach you a little bit how to do it, he is available. You
can go to. I bet he has a camp. I bet he has a camp.
Yeah, he's expensive, but you can get him right now. You can get him to come to your house and teach your kid if you want to pay for it. Literally, he's available. So it's like, again, you can't hire him as a quarterback for your team. That he's not. But literally the best quarterback, maybe, one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the world you can get. That's why these things are so powerful.
I think that's a super analogy. And I am guessing that as AI becomes more mainstreamed in everything, this will drive the need to use even more vendors, or at least that would be my theory. Am I right in that theory?
That is my belief. Yes, that's my belief.
Tell me how you think it plays out.
Well, I think we're moving into a world where if you just think of the most important skill in the last century, that was the ability to identify, hire, and manage talent.
Yeah.
And there are tens of thousands of great books on that. Every single MBA has at least 3 or 4 courses on how to do that well. We've all talked about it. Everyone has a sense of that. Everyone has been hired, and many of which has hired and managed people. So we all kind of have a sense of those types of things. That is still an important skill, but in this century, the most important skill is the ability to select and manage vendors. And that vendor could be contractors, that vendor could be software, it could be a lot of different types of things. Almost every company has way more vendors than they have people. Outside of like Walmart and Amazon, which they employ over 1 million people each, almost every company has way more vendors. Sometimes like we're talking about 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more vendors than they have people. So, and there is no book about it that I know of on how to do it. There's no MBA courses on it. It is extremely hard to do, but that is the most important skill that we all have to get better
So
at.
your thing would be, if business schools are really keeping up with the marketplace, someone somewhere would create a class on this. At least
I mean, for
one,
sure.
maybe
I mean, obviously, I think business school is complete waste of time. And I mean, it's very good if you want to find your spouse or something. So and it's just have fun. So, it just certainly has some value there, but it has bad ROI outside of social reasons. But even putting that aside, you would expect that you'll know that the schools are more relevant when they start moving in that direction.
I love this comment because I think it's going to generate a lot of discussion from a lot of the business school people we've had on the show. I want to just stay on this provocative note and say, in our first show, you said that everyone in procurement should be fired because they weren't very good at vendor management. They were just good at cost management. Do you still feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, most companies don't even have anyone in procurement. I mean, you got to be 500 people plus usually before you have someone in procurement. If you had someone called procurement and you're 100 people, well, your company's going to go under anyway. You clearly don't know how to manage your company, right? So usually you're talking about whenever you don't have a procurement person until you're at least 500, maybe 1,000 people.
Yeah,
or
you have to get pretty big, or procurement.
You always have to be big, and already by that point,
you
you have so many random bureaucratic people that do bureaucratic things that you probably have 30% of people you should probably get rid of that have jobs like quote unquote procurement. But yeah, of course, procurement is it's a negative. It's not just zero value; it's negative value at almost every company.
And it's negative value because it's in the way of the actual project. Or give me a
it makes the whole idea of having a procurement person is to make things move slower. Right. That is literally the idea. It's at some point you want to buy something and you're like, okay, I'm getting to the decision I want to buy. Now I have to bring in the procurement team and they have to go do their thing. Right.
Yeah.
So that is literally what you have procurement do is to slow things down. That makes no sense in most companies. Why would you want to slow things down? And then they save you 3%. It's so you just slowed everything down for 3%. And then it's and it's a bad experience for the other people in your company. They hate it. It's a bad experience for the vendor. So they're probably going to give you 20% less service because now they have to deal with this. And they just had a bad experience. Imagine you're hiring somebody. And some companies do this. It's right before you're going to hire them, you put them through this whole terrible process. And then you try, instead of they wanted 100 grand a year and you beat them down to 98 grand a year. Right. Or something. And, by showing them all these things and, they're going to come in, they're I hate this company. You would just again, some companies do that to their employees. So those companies will likely go out of business. They're just not good. And, government does that sometimes to their employees, but they're the only one, their only employer. And it's for certain types of things. If you want to work for the FBI or the CIA, they're going to do that to you, but you have no choice. there.
Yeah.
But like for most things, like you just don't want to do that. You want people to have a great experience coming in. And that means you have to treat your vendors well. That doesn't mean you have to overpay them or anything, just like you don't have to overpay your employees, but you've got to treat them well. You have to think of your vendor as like part of the team. And that could be even an API. You want to be able to use that in the right way. You want to treat it well. You want to treat the other people well. So they're helping you, they're supporting you, etc.
The sound bites coming off the show are going to be fabulous. I'm just saying. And I want to stay on this because you also wrote a note that you are shorting Booz Allen, the consulting firm that gets most of its revenue from the government. Tell us why and what lessons can business leaders take from this whole thing we've just been talking about? So start with Booz and then go into like what's happening.
So Booz Allen they make 98% of their revenue from the government, and they're often doing things that the government should do themselves. So this is like it's not exactly where it's like you're having a vendor who's doing something you're hiring for someone for 3 hours a week to do a specialty thing. In their case, most of the people you hire through them are full-time people doing something. It's like the Pentagon hires. They have many people at Booz Allen who join the Pentagon to help them buy ammunition. Right, something that like they should be able to do themselves, and they're often hiring like a 27-year-old person who has a political science degree, who's just a normal person, it's probably relatively smart person, but they could have hired that person themselves, and then they pay them, and that person's like commuting to the Pentagon from Minnesota every week, and all in cost is $1.1 million. That's like a typical thing. Like there's no one in the world who thinks this is a good bargain. Yes, you need someone to help you buy ammunition. There's no reason why they can't bring that person on. And they can bring that person on like internally to go do that. Now the Pentagon might need better hiring and firing authority, which they don't have today. So there's a whole bunch of things. So this is also this short is a bet that this administration is going to be a little bit more sensible. They're going to have the right hiring and firing authorities. They're going to do a few other sensible things so that like folks like the Pentagon can actually make the right decisions.
But the lesson here, if I put all of this together, I think what you're saying is, geez, because they are renting Booz to do regular jobs, and they're essentially renting Booz Allen to do their normal job, and they're overpaying for it. So their vendor management in this case is terrible.
Correct.
Yeah. And so what you're saying is the lesson here is you have to look at everything and the outputs, including the vendors. Is that right? And do you have any tips for how to do that?
I mean, a lot of these things, you don't need tips. Like they're actually just common sense.
Yeah.
Like there isn't anyone who would look at what the Pentagon spends on booze and thinks like, this is good, right? I mean, there's literally nobody. It's bipartisan. Like it's not like, it's from Elizabeth Warren to Tom Cotton. It's like it's bipartisan. They think this is bad. So it's like I can't even imagine there's like one of 100 senators who would think this is a good thing. So everybody from every walk of life is going to think this is bad. Now, it doesn't mean Booz won't continue. I have a short on them. The stock has gone down pretty significantly since I shorted it. Yeah. But like I might be wrong about that, and they might. If you're long on government dysfunction, then you're long on Booz. If you think government will actually reform over time, which I'm hopeful, but that that historically has not been the case, then maybe maybe then you're short on Booz.
And CMO Confidential does not give financial advice ever.
Yes, exactly.
So,
yeah.
I know you also wanted to say one or two words on kind of the dichotomy of private equity firms and how
private equity firms, and I wasn't really around in the 80s, but my guess in the 80s and 90s is that a company that was bought by a private equity firm was way better run company than a company that wasn't.
Yeah.
So the average company, that private equity firm, back then they called them LBO companies or whatever. They were leaner, they moved faster, they had less bureaucracy, they were more profitable, they had a better strategy, they employed smarter people.
And because they would do a leverage buyout, the LBO thing, and that would put pressure on the company to cut all the bureaucracy you were just talking
I
about.
mean, it isn't
Yeah.
it isn't any different today. They still load them up on debt. It's still the same thing today, but for whatever reason, um, I don't. I think the alpha back in the day was the reason why these private equity firms existed was to take a company and make it much much better. Now,
Yeah.
back then, the interest rates were pretty high.
Yeah.
So it was actually very expensive. They often had to do junk bonds. They were, often way, they're in the teens percent that they had it. So the debt was very, very, very expensive. So they really had to make the company much better. Now you start to go to the world in the 2000s where the debt gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. At some point, it gets close to zero.
Yeah.
And you don't have to, it becomes a lot more about financial engineering than really making that company better. So the average private equity person who's been in the business for the last 15 years, they could make tons of money without necessarily improving the company. And so, at least for me, when I've interacted with private equity backed companies, I don't think they're run any better than non-private equity backed companies today. I don't think they're less bureaucratic. I don't think the employees are better. I don't think they're leaner. I don't think they move faster. So, because I don't think the private equity people have had to make them better. In fact, the traditional exit for a private equity company today to get rid of your, when you actually make money, when you
Sell to
buy a
another
company, is
private
you
equity
sell it to
company.
another
Yeah.
private equity company.
Yeah.
So imagine Blackstone buying it from KKR. It's
Yeah.
not like, it's not like they can even improve it that much. KKR is already amazing. Like,
Yeah.
what can Blackstone do? It's not like, oh yeah, those KKR guys are idiots. They didn't know how to run this company.
This
Now
is
I can like make
interesting.
this company so much better. They're already buying probably a company that's like relatively. So it's a lot more about financial engineering now than it is about improving the company.
Well, and we're going to see because, when you could borrow money at very low interest rates, you could dividend yourself like crazy.
Yeah,
And
that's
now
what they did.
at
Yeah.
higher, and you could just load on the debt. Now at higher rates, dividending yourself, it's going to be a little harder. So we'll
Correct.
see what happens, which brings us to our traditional last question. It's a two-parter. You have to take one or both, but you must take at least one.
Okay.
Funniest story you can tell on the air or practical advice for our listeners we haven't discussed yet.
A practical advice.
All right, very good.
So that's the question. Sorry.
Yeah, you can do funniest story and or practical advice we haven't talked about yet.
Well, I mean, I think we talked about it a little bit, but my guess is almost anything to do with like an MBA is just extremely bad ROI. Today, if you got an MBA outside of the top 3 schools,
Yeah.
you are going to lose money. Again, you might meet your spouse, so the ROI might be extremely high for your life.
Yeah.
Or you might have just like tons of fun or make lifelong friends. There's a lot of other good reasons to go there. But if you think you're going to like make your career better, I think in most cases it makes it worse. In some cases, it might make it marginally better, but not enough to justify like the cost. And you have 2 costs. One is you have the cost of like the tuition, housing, all that other stuff that, the tuition there. But the second is you have the lost revenue and the lost 2 years of your career where your career didn't progress. And so if you're making 120 grand before MBA, you might be making 160 grand if you just kept on that trajectory, right?
Yeah.
And then you leave the MBA and now you're making 140 or something. Like it often just doesn't play out.
It's interesting. I think that's probably true, maybe in some college degrees as well. So
I think it's true in most college degrees. Yes.
there we go.
Yeah,
All right, another little incendiary thing we'll cut up as a short. Thank you, Auren, and thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. Look for more of our shows on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, which include From the Academics, the Insomnia Cookies Case, How Northwestern Uses the Ghost Model to Teach Marketing, The gumball machine is broken. Rethinking B2B marketing. The top 5 mistakes CEOs and boards make when hiring CMOs, and of course, Auren's first show, Unlocking the Potential of MarTech. Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.